the actual step.
Thank you so much, Jason. And I'm really happy that people are taking notes from each other and learning from each other. So let's give the mic to Aaliyah. Can you tell us about new member integration in Philly?
Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm involved with the membership engagement committee, which we do have. So that's sort of one of the things that we focus on, or the main thing we focus on. So like a lot of other people, we have monthly new member meetings. So I think that and we phone back through our new member list to get people to go to those. I think the harder part is like getting people to go to the next thing, right? Or we might be able to get people to go to general meetings, and the question is like how to sort of build that out. So I'm actually trying to get rolling a one-on-one system where we would contact people who come to the new member meetings to like set up someone specific that they can talk to. I've been sort of shopping around to other chapters as well. So I think this is something we're discussing, right? Because it is a problem. I mean, it's a challenge for all of us. But something we've been thinking about is a sort of Rose Buddies type model where people would be assigned to a specific person that then checks in with them, once every few months. So I can't say whether it'll work, but we're trying to like think creatively around this because we, like many other people, have a lot of paper members. I think one of the places where people often get involved, or where that's like the first place that they go, is through political education, which has been pretty successful. But then, the question is how to integrate the political education into the campaigns that we're doing. So that's something that I also think that we can sort of think about going forward. But yeah, I think Shanti was one who mentioned that. To the extent that we relied on sort of social spaces and bars and things like that before the pandemic, those social spaces are hard to recreate. So yeah, I think that we all have to be creative and thinking through new ways to get people on board. I do think that as we're starting to have some more exciting campaigns that are coming up, we've had some housing, like some sort of pilot housing canvassing that will hopefully be a full chapter effort very soon. That's also been really good for getting new members sort of out there talking to people. And I agree with Austin that like getting people something to sink their teeth in is like really where it's at. But we're not organizing in the easiest of circumstances.
Thank you, Aaliyah, and thanks again to all of the panelists for describing how their chapters integrate new members. I think this is a very pressing question as we are on the cusp of reaching 100,000 members, and who knows who will get the hat. So the next question is about, obviously there's a convention year, so there's a lot of people who are advocating for either certain type of politics within DSA or certain campaigns, either at the national level or the local level. And to that end, people form political caucuses. So do national or local caucuses have a strong presence in your chapters? And how do caucus dynamics affect the chapter dynamics as a whole, or vice versa? And I want to be clear that I'm not talking about identity-based caucuses. These are political caucuses. And I will popcorn it to Austin G.
This is going to be a very simple answer for me, which is there's basically no national caucus presence in Richmond. There's a few reasons for that, right? I'd say the biggest reason for that is that at least compared to some of the other larger chapters that are on this call, Richmond is definitely smaller in size than some of the other chapters, which are going to have, or I guess be more susceptible. Is susceptible the word I would use? They're going to be more susceptible to influence from national caucuses, right? Now, I'd say the best example of this, right, for anybody who was around for 2019 convention, right, when the resolution was introduced for my chapter on what anybody's opinion on pass the hat was, nobody knew what the fuck build was. Nobody knew what the fuck bread and roses was. If you go to my chapter and say those sorts of things, people's eyes will glaze over. So once again, my answer on this is simple, which is there's basically, now, I don't know if there's maybe like members in the chapter that are like in LSC or in something else, probably, but there is no like Richmond local of whatever. And I'd say caucus stuff comes up during general meetings pretty much never. If I don't think it ever has at all. So yeah.
Thank you, Austin. I will pass the question to Andrea.
Yeah, so I'm not in a caucus personally, which like at times where around convention can feel like a little bit alienating sometimes when there's like a lot of stuff happening around caucuses. But I forget usually, like but in New York City, I'd say we have three major caucuses. Like nationally, there's people in Bread and Roses. There's people in like what around convention was socialist majority, which tends to be like in our chapter, the people who are most active in the electoral campaigns in our electoral working group, to just sort of like to like summarize like who is in that caucus instead of like talking about the differences, which are like harder for me to articulate though. And then a local caucus called Emerge, which is like also a Marxist caucus that does a lot of work around like our defund campaign in New York City, for example. And they have put forward, I think, like proposals in the past at our chapter-wide convention. I wouldn't even say it's like tense or anything like that. I wouldn't say that we're like, I don't know, especially like the past year, like our chapter leadership is like a pretty good mix of people from all the caucuses. Like, I don't think it's like strongly weighted towards one political ideology, which has been super helpful. And then additionally, like I said, like socialist majority tends to be like the people that were working on electoral campaigns. Some of that has like changed as well. Like as we've like members of Bread and Roses have gotten more active in helping with our electoral races and you know, and helping with like a Green New Deal, for example, which wasn't typically as embraced by the caucus, I guess. But yeah, now it's like they're more present to sort of like facilitate debate around like proposals that go to our chapter-wide leadership. Like, for example, there was like a debate around earlier this year around like we're running races for city council, but like I would say at the city level, New York City doesn't have as much power. Like most everything is funded through the state. Like even our public transportation is like funded on a state level, not a city level. And same with like our public housing. So there's a debate around the extent to which like how many candidates we should run, how much capacity we should spend on it when we're also trying to pass like public power and you know, like our housing campaigns. And there were, you know, the different caucuses took different sides on that. But it was pretty transparent, which has been helpful, I guess, too. Like I think that's some of the tension like earlier in our chapter around like 2017 or so was sort of like the proto caucuses and organizing along these lines where like there was tension around even sort of like administrative decisions we made. And it was clear that there were like people taking different sides. Now it feels like much more collaborative to me, I would say, just anecdotally. But yeah, it's not like any of our campaigns are like exclusively run by Bread and Roses or exclusively socialist majority. Like I work on a Green New Deal, and in our working group in public power, our working group was like absolutely just a total mix of people. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That's very insightful to know about New York City DSA. I will hand the mic over to Aaliyah from Philly.
Yeah, so I would say that caucus dynamics are really prominent in Philly. This is an event hosted by a caucus, so you could probably guess that. But they're actually mostly local caucuses. So we do have a few members. I think there is a local Bread and Roses chapter. I'm sure we have some members who are in some other national caucuses, but the national caucus really aren't the sort of defining political feature of the chapter in the way that the local caucuses are. So, I mean, yeah, so there are basically two major caucuses. One of them is Left Unity, of which I am a member and just hosting this event. And the other is Momentum. the steering committee seats are split, so Momentum has a majority. And I would say that really a shocking number of our chapter decisions are filtered through this caucus tension. So like a lot of steering committee votes end up being split right along these lines. Though there is one unaffiliated member. I think Andrea mentioned some problems with like even administrative decisions being having tension around them because of caucus stuff. And that's something we've definitely experienced where but like almost not every resolution, but like a lot of resolutions that go up at any given GM will be knockdown, drag out fights on caucus lines, even when they're things that seem like pretty uncontroversial, maybe. And we've had like a couple of, we had a mutual aid resolution that went down that on a tie vote twice. So there's like a really strong division. And the caucus is whip votes for specific resolutions. That drives turnout. So in some ways, you could say, it drives turnout. That's good, I guess. But it drives a kind of, I think it does drive a kind of engagement that's not very collaborative, and it encourages, recruitment and vote whipping. So just so that people will show up to vote, and that doesn't really end up feeding into the kind of more sustained engagement with a chapter that I think would, really helpful to our work. And in particular, I think it's actually been a really big stumbling block as we try to sort of navigate around COVID. Things have to get tossed back and forth. If a resolution doesn't pass in one meeting, it can't get talked about to the general membership again until the next general meeting 3 months later, 4 months later. So it makes things go really slowly. And so I think that's part of why we've had problems like regrouping after Bernie dropped out and COVID happened. And partially because of this, like any given committee is often primarily comprised of one caucus or another, and that contributes to some problems with coordinating among committees, getting campaigns that are really involving the whole membership. So I would say this is a a large dynamic in our local.
Aptly put, Aliyah. Shanti, can you talk a little bit about San Francisco DSA?
Yeah, we're pretty much caucus free. I mean, we have members participate in certain caucuses. Like some people are in LSC nationally, like I was in Build for a hot second, but didn't really agitate within the chapter or organize the caucus with the national caucus within that chapter. So that doesn't really exist. We have a local caucus, Red Star, which is like a revolutionary Marxist caucus. They're pretty cool. They work with Emerge a lot in New York. They collaborate and have aligned politics. And I'm not a member, although I do share quite a lot of politics with them as a revolutionary Marxist. But I'm just kind of a free agent. I don't think we've ever had an established caucus presence, and it really varies across the Bay Area, right? Like for example, East Bay had a very strong Bread and Roses contingent for a long time, and still kind of does. Although it's shifted a little bit there. But then here, right across the bridge, we're very non-caucusy. And I think we tend to it's not that we don't have serious strategic disagreements within the chapter. We absolutely do. I don't know if there's an explanation for why that culture just never arose here. But there's also I think just a lot of what we have in common. I think Austin mentioned Pass the Hat. Our chapter, so Pass the Hat was very contentious nationally, but regardless of what your affiliation was, or your particular ideological bent within DSA, our chapter endorsed that unanimously in the general meeting. There wasn't a single no, right? And there were a few hundred people